Welcome everyone to my channel. Today I have an exciting real-life encounter for you to enjoy. This encounter would be terrifying if it were me. I'd probably end up passing out and becoming a 411 statistic or something, honestly. And that's not a joke either. Just wait until you hear what these people made it through. First off, if you have an encounter you'd like to share, please send it to my email in the description, shortstoriesbymatt@gmail.com. Don't forget to subscribe, share, give this video a thumbs up, and hit the notification bell so you'll know right when a new story is uploaded. So the experience starts like this. Dear Matt, my name is Josiah. I'm 46 years old now and I'm from Tennessee. The events in this experience happened to me, a close friend named James, and a few of his cousins. James and I were about 17, and his three cousins were 14, 18, and 19. All of us had good knowledge of the woods, and what to and not to play with, and we learned not to run away from certain animals as well. James and I especially loved the outdoors. We went camping or exploring in the woods as often as possible when we were younger. The older kids always pulled tricks on us and pranked us. That helped us to learn to get out of some sticky situations. Sometimes, literally. Our families have been like blood relatives for years, starting with our grandparents. My pappy and his granddad, when they were younger and single, lived off the land together for years in East Tennessee. We learned so much from them about the woods. They loved us kids, and we loved them. Me and James especially loved all their stories about hunting and fishing. That was their way of life. Our favorite was when Pappy and Granddad had to fight off a wild boar that charged them. We fantasized about buying a cabin together and just living off the land like they did all those years ago. A part of me still wishes we could have made that dream happen. Anyhow, enough about me. I told you I would give you a Bigfoot encounter, so here it is. Me, James, and his three cousins were having a boys' weekend sleepover at Pappy's cabin, and Granddad was there too. So the first day after a big breakfast and some stories from Pappy and Granddad, us 5 kids went out hiking. James and I had just bought identical 9-inch Bowie knives at the local hunting shop the night before, and needless to say, we were eager to use them. So we made some sandwiches, filled our canteens to bring with us, and we went out. It was about 1 p.m., and we all knew the area well from exploring all those years when we weren't afraid of getting lost. So we hiked about 2 whole hours north-northwest through thick woods to get to the large area of fairly open field where a very large hickory tree is. We always would sit underneath and rest there for a while. It was such a beautiful fall day, just like something out of a book. We got out our sandwiches and ate all of them since we were all still growing boys, and we were, as our parents called us, bottomless pits. After we ate, James and I cut off some branches and started whittling with our new knives. The wood seemed like butter, because we sharpened our knives so good. And even though they were a bit big for whittling, we loved it, because they were brand new. We were having an awesome day. Everything was going right. We had that feeling like nothing could ruin our day. Let's just say we quickly forgot that feeling. Andy, the youngest cousin, started complaining as always because of a nasty smell. We told him it was probably just an unfortunate dead animal rotting somewhere. But then it hit us too. And let me tell you, this smell was intense. I've been sprayed by a skunk before, and if that is a 10, then this was at least a 7. But we quickly forgot because there was a steady breeze, still assuming it was a dead animal. After probably an hour and a half, we decided to head back since the sun was beginning to go down. So we all got up to head back, and then we smelled it again. We were on top of a decent hill with a shallow incline, and some of the grass got up to 3 foot tall. I'm adding this detail because of what happened next. As we were looking around to see where the smell was coming from, James said in a tone that I had never heard from him, "Oh my God, what the heck is that?" I was the first to turn around, knowing that this was serious because of the way James was speaking. And then I saw it. Hands down the largest and strongest looking animal I have ever seen. It had medium brown hair all over and a face like a giant gorilla. It was staring right at us and it did not look happy. My guess is that it was at least 9 to 9.5 feet tall. Now, I wasn't the oldest, but I was the biggest, at 6'4" and about 300 pounds. The second cousin was 6'2", James, and the rest were around 5'8", 5'11" or so. So we weren't little boys. But this thing completely dwarfed all of us. I have never been so terrified before in my life. We always were told that humans are at the top of the food chain and there's nothing for us to really be afraid of. But we all realized at that moment that we were not. This creature had such broad shoulders and massive defined muscles that were easily to see despite how hairy it was. I cannot say it enough. This thing was huge. It seemed to do some sort of a yellowish bark and started running towards us. James and I knew that oftentimes it is wise when faced with a wild animal to stand your ground and not to run away, because you'll more than likely have better chances because most animals are faster than humans. But we knew this is no ordinary animal. We were in his territory and we had to get out and get out fast. The others already started running away. Then me and James looked at each other and took off as well. We heard massive footsteps behind us and we were terrified. Now, like I said before, I was the biggest of the bunch and would always lose in a sprint to the others, but I was neck and neck with all of them because of the adrenaline pumping through my body. But eventually, we started to slow down because the brush was thicker on the way back, and the adrenaline was starting to wear off. So at what seemed like a wall of brush, we all stood perfectly still for a moment. We, as teenage boys, had never been so quiet. We were listening so carefully to every sound coming from those woods. But there was nothing unusual by any means, just a few squirrels in the trees. So we turned around and we couldn't see anything anymore. I didn't understand. I knew we couldn't have outrun it, and I knew without a faint whisper of a doubt that what I saw was real. It must have lost interest in us because we exited its territory. Or maybe it's following us out of sight by our scent, is what I was thinking. Well, we got back to the cabin safe, although, as you can imagine, we were all on edge on the way back. Once we got back, we told Pappy and Granddad what happened immediately. They both got the most serious face that I have ever seen with them. They told us to get enough wood for the night and to keep the doors locked until tomorrow. Now we were truly scared. That was the longest trip for wood of our lives. But once we got back in and all sat down, we asked what was that thing. They looked at each other and then said, "We don't know. The best thing we can say is it's what people call Sasquatch." We were shocked. We thought that was all folklore and legend. So we stayed quiet and listened further. They continued, "We've seen them before. They're something y'all need to stay away from. One time, we were hiking, and we saw several of them. Once they caught sight and smell of us, they started growling and screaming. Then they started throwing things at us. A couple of them even started coming towards us. We were so terrified we grabbed our shotguns, and even though we knew it probably wouldn't be enough to take one of them down, we had to open fire, and we hit a few of them. Thankfully, they all ran off as soon as they heard the gunfire. Now we were really scared, as you can imagine. And just as night went on, it didn't get much better. Because of what happened next, we didn't sleep at all that night. As James and I were putting up the dishes from dinner at about 8:30, we heard some noises outside the kitchen window. We were terrified to even look out the window, so we quickly just finished up. After that, we all sat in the living room and watched some TV before bed. James and I were the last ones to go to sleep, so it was about 10 p.m. when we decided to call it a night. So James went to get a glass of water from the kitchen tap. When he turned on the kitchen light, he screamed. So I came running and I froze in fear. It was looking down at us from the kitchen window. James fell backwards onto the floor because he was so scared. It looked even more terrifying because its eyes were glowing red. I'm sure it was just a reflection of the light in the kitchen, but it was still horrifying. We both ran upstairs to the bedroom we shared and jumped in bed. I can't even describe to this day the amount of fear we had at that time. This thing followed us and had been watching us for who knows how long from the window. Talk about creepy. And to make matters worse, we heard grunts, screams, and whoops all night long. But the next day, nothing out of the ordinary happened. And it stayed that way for the rest of the trip. So once we saw what we saw, he and I told the story to several people, even our parents. But of course, no one believed us. Often he would be the one telling the story and he got treated badly for it. Like it was an absurd story made out of his imagination. Or that he was a jerk kid trying to trick people. And that it could never happen and wasn't real. I didn't take for granted my friendship with him, so I often stood up for my friend. Especially since I was there. So as a result, I became a recipient of much ridicule myself. But every time we talked to my pappy and his granddad, they would just listen. They understood that what we saw was real, because they knew what was in the woods since they lived in it for so many years. It was so nice to be able to talk to them while they were still alive. But having people reject me and make fun of me and James has taught me to not care too much about what others think. And I personally don't think that is a bad thing. So my message to anybody listening to this, I think would be that anyone who has a real life story like mine should never be afraid to say what they saw. I wasn't, and I'm better for it to this day. So Matt, there's my encounter story. I hope that because of it, more people will be willing to share their experiences too. I really enjoy your stories and hope your channel continues to grow. Right on, my friend. Well, thank you, Josiah, for bravely sharing this encounter with us, and it's my privilege to give you a voice without ridicule. See, that's something that needs to be addressed. These encounters do happen, and sometimes often. Yet so many people are put down or called names over relating them. It shouldn't be that way. Anyone should be able to tell about what happened to them. That's one of my goals with this channel, to be a voice for those too afraid to use their own. Again, if you have a Bigfoot encounter, please feel free to send me an email about it. You don't even have to use your name or exact locations. As always, thank you for listening, and I'll catch everyone in the next video.